Rain patters down and pools in the cracks between Soho's battered flagstones. It's a brisk Friday night in London, 1984. Neon glows like a painted promise across the glistening pavements. Reflected in every puddle red-green, violet spilled out of glowing bar signs. Club frontages and yellow taxis snaking slowly down Old Compton Street. Under the fizz of artificial light, the air hangs thick with cigarette smoke. Wet asphalt and a tang of late-night chip wrappers. Slip in under the canopy of a battered umbrella, and the senses sharpen. Electric color pulses on all sides, a steady shimmer bleeding from the legendary Raymond Review Bar's Cinebeacon for bohemians, wide-eyed tourists, and after-hours dreamers alike. The fizz and crack of neon is almost musical, interwoven with the distant chug of an idling taxi and the quick staccato of heels on wet stone. There's an energy here, fizzy and slightly illicit, that thrums beneath your coat and seeps into the bones. At the crossroads of Greek Street and Old Compton, a narrow doorway spills punters onto the pavement, the Wag Club, a magnet for night crawlers and trendsetters. The queue snakes past graffiti-tagged walls, shoulders draped in oversized blazers and leather jackets, trainers blinking white under streetlights. Inside, the bass rattles your chest. Spandau Ballet or Soul to Soul on cassette, perhaps a trace of Bowie lingering in the speakers. Bodies move, smoke coils under lasers, and drink cheap lager, sticky rum and cokeser, passed like tokens down the bar. Tonight, the lineup is a local DJ, spinning imported 12-inch records, UDB, hard-pressed to find in HMV or our price on the High Street. Just off Brewer Street, a battered alley beckons beneath a flickering sign. It's Bag O' Nails, the late-night haunt with a battered jukebox and walls sticky from decades of spilled pints. Here, the crowd is older, a barmaid in a battered Bananarama t-shirt, men in suits loosening their ties, a street poet reciting to no one in particular. Everyone knows the rules. Keep one eye on your wallet, another on who's drifting through the door. The pub's own aroma, sour but comforting blend of flat ale, sweat, and the faintest edge of disinfectant sticks to your clothes, a badge of honor until the morning. Between clubs and pubs, the streets hum with their own cabaret. Soho in the rain is a procession of faces. The drag queen in 6-inch heels picking her way around the puddles outside Madame Jo. The record shop worker in a shoplifted anorak, ducking out to a phone box to call her mum in Croydon. A couple clutching chips smothered in salt and vinegar laugh beneath a lurid Odeon sign, next to a teenage busker plucking Billy Bragg on a battered acoustic. Unemployed lads drift in packs, voices raised in mock bravado. All Doc Martens and Stone Island, eyes forever scanning for both trouble and opportunity. Upstairs windows blink with possibility. Velvet-draped speakeasies, smoky upstairs jazz bars where a lone saxophone mourns out a tune for a couple swaying in the half-light. Sometimes you see a shadow flick the curtains back, watching the procession below. These clubs and secret rooms are invisible to daytime Soho. Members only, password protected, known only to those in the circuit. You'd only learn about them if you were a regular, or knew how to ask for the record behind the counter at Groove Records. Tucked by Berwick Street Market, amid stalls lit by the yellow haze of sodium lamps. Part of Soho's neon heart throbs in its food. It's 1984, and London's palate is broadening. Spanish, Thai, Italian, Greek tiny restaurants squeezed between newsagents and sex shops, steam fogging the windows in a patchwork of fingerprints. In the Two Brewers, the kitchen barely bigger than the mop cupboard. Cheap pasta comes thick with garlic, washed down with wine poured from a jug. Next door are fry-ups and late-night coffee in glass mugs stacked behind the counter. the smell of burnt toast and greasy eggs drifting out every time the door bangs open to another punter. If you've a bit of spare change, the snub coins of 10p 50 pellet night treats linger. A pink frosted donut from a window counter, or a Polaroid snapshot from the booth beside the sandwich bar, your face caught in the spill of garish light. Behind the neon, brighter still, are Soho's people. Street traders hawking illicit cassettes, self-recorded, mysterious. Maybe the new romantics or northern soul. Club girls swapping stories about Prince Charles's engagement and the miners' strike. Late-night kitchen porters and dancers on a smoke break. Their laughter mixing with the clatter of glass bottles bundled onto milk floats at 4 in the morning. Soho was a meeting place and a pressure valve. Queer folk, with nowhere else to go, aspiring playwrights scribbling in notepads, and tabloid hacks chasing a story, nursing a pint until closing time. Friendships, affairs, and heated rows all played out in the theatre of rain-slicked streets. Beneath that eye-popping, fizzing light, yet, if you listen carefully, you sense that change is creeping in. Developers buy up the old shops and bazaars, rents creep higher, and the number of tiny, smoky jazz dens dwindles, as big neon gives way to polished glass. Some worry that the spirit, the blend of grit and glam, the creativity fed by scrimpers, misfits, and mavericks, won't survive the march of gentrification. By the late 80s and early 90s, the faces on the street grow less familiar. Standbys like Soho Jazz and the little tap-and record stalls are pushed out by upmarket coffee chains and bistros, their windows brightly lit but lacking the old twinkle of mischief. The night feels different. Safer, perhaps, but also a little less wild, a little less unique. For those who called Soho home, if only for one fever-dreamed night, it was always more than a postcode. It was a sanctuary for outsiders and a launchpad for dreams. An after-dark playground where the rules felt flexible, and the city's creative soul shone brightest under the rain and neon. Looking back now, memories of those sodden pavements and dazzling lights are more than mere nostalgia. They're a reminder that every generation leaves its mark in flickers, if only. A sliver of moon glimmered on the silvery Thames, barely slicing through the haze as a jagged pulse ricocheted off concrete walls. Somewhere near Limehouse, behind a shuttered factory front, teenage feet crunched glass and gravel, drawn by bass lines so deep they seemed to shake the very riverbank. The air itself trembled, thick with cigarette smoke and the tang of cold sweat, as a crowd spilled from the shadows and into a night that for a few electric hours belonged entirely to them. In the late 1980s, when alcopops were just elbowing their way onto corner shop fridges and old Woolworths branches still clung to the high street, London's warehouses underwent a stealthy rebirth. No longer only the realm of dockworkers and lorry drivers, these empty hulks became the crucible for something new or seen, nurtured by DIY sound systems and word of mouth, far from the velvet ropes and neon of West End clubs. While nearby cranes rusted in silence, inside the warehouses, the ceaseless thud of Roland drum machines and hypnotic loops filled the night with a sense of impossible possibility. Picture one of those anonymous loading bays on a drizzly Saturday night, reeking faintly of old engine oil and river mud. A hastily stenciled smiley face, iconic stamp of the era, glowed amid a flurry of torch beams as revelers slipped inside, clutching battered cans of Tennant S or plastic Evian bottles stuffed with whatever would get them through until dawn. The DJ table was an old door propped on milk crates, littered with crackling mixtapes and trailed by a garden of tangled wires. Someone passed out polos and someone else flicked lighters in time to Vince Clarke-inspired synth stabs. Everywhere, denim and dayglow, puffer jackets, and Ford Escort keys jingling in pockets. In the thick of it all, the music was less about lyrics and more about sensation. The squelch of a 303 synthesizer making your ribcage rattle, the rat-a-tat clap of a snare, the warmth of a bass line, so fat it seeped up through battered Adidas trainers and into your bones. Strobes carved faces into white masks, all sharp cheekbones and wide eyes, as clusters of strangers became tribes joined not by postcode or football, but by a shared need to dance, to disappear. Out by the battered toilet cubicles, someone sold glow sticks, while outside a Ford Transit idled, ready to hop postcodes if word came down of a police raid. Around the makeshift chill-out corners, a pile of beanbags in a corner, breathing in the scent of strong tea and patchouli, familiar sights flashed into focus. Filofaxes spilling written directions, folded ordnance survey maps, party lines scrawled in biro on wrists. Instructions passed like a secret in the queue at a record shop, or behind the tills at sea, and there were the ice cream tubs filled with pink and white pecan mix, looted from the local newsagent by those wise enough to know you'd need sugar at 4 a.m. And in the back, leaning against a crate, a decommissioned milk float served as both prop and impromptu bar, bathed in ultraviolet, stocked with little more than panda pops, crisps and whispers. Every party was both escape and rebellion, shaped by the ghosts of a decade marked by headlines and hardship. For some, the detours into these party-scarred warehouses were shaped by bleak prospects, youth unemployment, the aftershock of miners' strikes, a sense that the old order formal discos, boozy pubs couldn't keep pace with their hunger for something vivid and vast. Acid House, with its loopy optimism and borderless DIY energy, offered a space where you didn't have to dress to impress. Liberation was found in the anonymity of the crowd, in the mind-melting repetition, in the raw rite of dancing beside someone you'd never see by daylight. Sometimes the party ended with dawn seeping gold through shattered roof panes, as the first DLR rattled past and a few diehards set off for greasy spoon breakfasts. Sometimes it ended far earlier, with a sudden flicker of blue and white as police swept through in high-vis jackets, dispersing the throng and sending chase-down cassette mixers flying into the gutter. The warehouse doors slammed shut, graffitied over once again with slogans and smudged phone numbers, awaiting the next Saturday and the next whisper. Always, in their wake, came quiet, the fizz of last embers, the slip of a flyer beneath a puddle, the leftover perfume of cider and sweat. For the communities clustered along the Thames and woven through the night bus system into South and East London, these warehouse parties were portals, places to shed the dull weight of routine and discover. Tribes built not on family ties or pay packets, but on rhythm, movement, and solidarity. The parties became a sanctuary from the regulated sameness of high street clubs nor guest lists. No expensive membership cards only, the promise of escape by word-of-mouth invitation or a scratchy landline call. Everyone was equal once the bass dropped. The usual hierarchies dissolved in a single, writhing rhythm, but nothing in England ever stands perfectly still, not the river, nor the city skyline, nor these clandestine gatherings. Little by little, word spread and rules tightened. The authorities, unnerved by stories of sleepless, euphoric teens and the whisper of Class A mischief, cracked down hard. Raves were raided, laws were drafted, and landlords put up new steel fences, finding buyers in the property boom to come. The old warehouses, once left to rot, were cleaned, rebranded, and parceled out as premium flats or creative studios. By the mid-1990s, Acid House was a memory, echoed on late-night radio mixes, and the odd retro night at licensed clubs no longer a secret. but the spark that set a generation alight. Still, if you pass those riverfront hulks now, sometimes on a humid summer's night, you swear you catch a stray thump of bass in the breeze and wonder just who still holds the key. If the pulse of those warehouse nights still beats in your memory, or you can recall sneaking over rain-licked cobbles with a handful of change and hope, let us know in the comments below. What did those nights mean to you? And which secret, echoing space was your England time capsule? A rainy Tuesday night, late in the spring of 1980, and Covent Garden glistens under the orange glow of sodium street lamps. The familiar drizzle patters against bricks polished by centuries of footsteps, but just past the seemingly sleepy market stands, a queue begins to dazzle beneath umbrellas, silver-faced boys in billowing pirate shirts, girls spun into silk and metallic lace, all swaying impatiently beside a discreet, nondescript door. The sound leaking from within is a strange alchemy. Infectious synths pulsing over clipped drumbeats, with snatches of laughter, hairspray, and anticipation swirling in the misty air. Welcome to the Blitz Club, a world apart, where the drabness of late 70s London is painted over each Tuesday by a wild, new romantic hand. It was not much to look at. The Blitz, a cramped wine bar stowed away off Great Queen Street, beneath the city's thrum of black cabs and winding buses, once the realm of office workers and dusty bottles. On Blitz nights it transformed utterly. At the door, Steve Strange would decide each soul's fate, his icy gaze a passport check for entry to another universe. There was no room for half-measures. Faded suits or safe haircuts could expect nothing more than a shiver out on the pavements. It was a ritual of transformation. Only the courageous bedizened in frilled blouses, painted veils, and cheekbones sculpted by the street's sodium glow apply. Inside, the Blitz became an explosion of vision and sound, at odds with the striking grimness of Britain beyond. Thatcher's London was grappling with strikes, 3-day weeks, unemployment biting at tired shop fronts, and the grit of dustbins left too long untended. The city still bore the pallor of the winter of discontent. Yet, in the Blitz, with Spandau Ballet's early synths or visages, proto-electro ringing out, the gloom was shrugged off, as if by magicians. Boy George, then still plain George O'Dowd, spun laughter and feathers like a conjurer, plucking delight from second-hand Oxfam finds and a riot of runny eyeshadow. It was not just fashion, it was a rebellion against beige wallpaper and the last dregs of ration book dullness. The clothes that bedecked these revelers had a gleeful audacity, built from whatever could be found, cast-off wedding dresses sliced into cloaks, jumble sale jewelry, the odd army surplus combed into glamour. There was more than a hint of historical drama. Elizabethan ruffs, Napoleon's jackets, Mad Hatter hats, cut with mirabelle chic. The scent inside was a heady blend of patchouli dust and hair lacquer borrowed from the local chemist. Glitter fizzed on the carpet. There were no smartphones in pockets, no endless selfies. Just Polaroids snapped in the smoky half-light, fizzy glasses of baby chim, and maybe a sneaked flat lager, hands sticky with the ghosts of Woolworth's pick-and mix. Outside, London slumbered dully. Inside, it was as if 1,000 technicolor knobs had been turned. It was not just about fashion, or even music. The Blitz electrified possibilities for a whole generation starved of magic. Those who arrived at its doors were artistes, dreamers, future icons, Mayfair models rubbing shoulders with squatters from King's Cross, makeup artists chatting to aspiring musicians clutching battered cassette tapes. You'd catch a snatch of David Bowie echoing overhead, or a rising pop hopeful testing their latest demo on Gung Ho. This was as much a workshop as a club. Here, Spandau Ballet got their first break visage, recorded early tracks, and the gestation of the next new sound and attitude took place between ripped-up gig flyers and a spill of foundation on a cracked sink. These were the seeds of a revolution one that would soon erupt onto club charts, top of the pops, and the fashion pages of ID and The Face. By 3:30 in the morning, the storm would scatter, bare ankles splashing puddles on the dash back to tube stations, streaks of glitter clinging to collars as night buses rattled across. Charing Cross Road, the air was thick with drizzle, and the faint, cloying echo of TDK tapes played on battered Walkmans. These Blitz kids, loud, lovely, and newly forged, prodded the sleepy city awake as they staggered towards kebab shops and, sometimes, tomorrow's catwalks. By dawn, that hidden room had returned to anonymity, its echoes snuffed by the scrape of a mop and the murmur of early milk floats rumbling past. Yet somewhere, someone's lipstick lingered on the rim of a glass, a quiet testament to what had been risked and won. Looking back, it is tempting to see it all as just a flamboyant dress rehearsal. But for a brief, singular moment, the Blitz was nothing less than the epicenter of a cultural earthquaker, safe harbor where eccentricity and courage were currency. And nothing was too much. For young people aching under the leaden weight of economic gloom and social conformity, this tiny club meant hope in a bottle, possibility in a powder puff. The fabled new romantic scene would, of course, soon be plucked up by the high street. Topshop sequined blouses, perms in the salon, brave mascara unleashed in sixth form loose. Fashion, after all, is never secret for long. But at its heart, and in those first heady months, this was an act of resistance as much as a party. It was an answer to grey skies and wage packets spent before the end of the week. London's heart beat brighter for it, just as its cheekbones grew sharper in the mirror. Times changed, of course. The scene spilled across Soho and Camden, aped by glossy magazines and catwalk catcalls. The Blitz itself faded, a legend outgrown by its own daring alumni, many of whom would stride onto world stages dressed in the imagination they first dared to show on those sodden spring nights. The club's physical presence is long gone now, replaced by the eternal churn of eateries and offices. But for a generation hungry for spectacle, for unexpected kinship and the joy of satriation, the memory of the Blitz stirs something stubborn, a touch of glitter that won't quite brush off. A refrain of electronica echoing in the background clutter of life. Were you there, clutching a pan stick and a dream, or did you spot a flash of cravat under the bus shelter lights? However you brushed up against the Blitz, drop your memories. On a damp Camden night, neon tubes flicker like restless fireflies above chalkboard gig listings, painting the drizzle-slicked pavements with erratic halos of blue and red. The pulse of a snare drum vibrates through the brickwork, rumbling up from Dingwells and winding its way down the canal towpath, mingling with the scent of stale lager and cigarette smoke that escapes every swinging door. Stretching out in every direction are tangled voices, bike chains, and the distant echo of someone tuning up for a three-chord revolution. In the late 70s and into the heart of the 80s, Camden Town became a beating artery in the city's musical organism, a place where you could lose yourself or find your tribe beneath the glow of battered venue signage. You might arrive clutching a battered canvas record bag, the straps digging into your shoulder as you queue outside the electric ballroom. The air teems with promise and cigarette ash, the sticky pavement betraying last night's spilled snakebite, and the hurried footfall of DMIs and creepers. Mods in crisp parkas jostle elbow to elbow with punks in spiked leather, their laughter rising above the low rumble of the Northern Line beneath their feet. There's the freeze in the bones from the canal, the anticipation of heat, a head heat from bodies, stage lights, and vitriolic, thrilling sound. Inside, Dingwall's sticky floors are an accepted part of the topography. The result of countless rounds of red stripe and coquant whatever dribbling onto wood-soaked dark by generations before you. The room is a long, low-throated affair, copper pipes exposed and echoing with lyrics that hang in the haze, not quite dissipating before the next shout or chord change. The band, some scruffy hopefuls whose name you'll half remember tomorrow, are barely visible past the moulded amp stacks and the huddled mass of Mohicans, safety pins, and velvet jackets. It doesn't matter. The music, tight, loud, alive, becomes a kind of weather. Something you stand in, feel on your skin, taste on your tongue with every lungful of smoky, humid air. No one here cares about reputation or reserve. It's shared sweat and the singular urgency of now. Upstairs at the ballroom, just past the ticket stub girls and a bouncer with a mustache so wide you'd swear it was fake, the main hall looms. It's a cathedral of sticky pop art, where students and shopgirls, aspiring rockers and roadies, meet in the swirling confusion of a Saturday night. The bar trades change with sticky fingers 5 OP notes or a scuffed pound coin. Depending on the year, and the selection behind the counter is predictably uninspired. Flat lager, warm cider, maybe a novelty alcopop if you're here in the late 80s. Still, you nurse it like sacrament, knowing you're among your people. And when the lights dim for a headline act, something electric happens in the shared silence. Even the most cynical indie kid can't help but grin when the first chords ring out and every head in the room tips forward, hair flopping and fists pumping in imperfect time. Downstairs, a different world. DJ nights thick with the buzz of expectation, where the floor is a checkerboard of baseball boots and battered heels. A ripple of hairspray and patchouli signals the arrival of a goth contingent. A circle of two-tone and ska kids practice dance steps beside the pinball machines. The smell is 12 parts beer, 1 part cheap perfume, and the press of bodies is both thrilling and faintly overwhelming, especially. Come last orders, when everyone seems to be shouting last requests across a melee of laughter and the low hum of the bar's ancient fridge. Sometimes, if you catch the offbeat at just the right moment, the accordion doors to the ballroom rattle in approval. Not all the fun happens after dusk. On weekend afternoons, Camden Market spills over from the shadow of the old lock, attracting musicians, crate diggers, badge sellers, and lost souls in battered Harringtons. The music drifts outward, merging with the sizzle of fried onions and the petrol fumes from battered Ford Transits unloading gear round the back. In the corner, a couple of buskers try their luck with a Clash cover, while inside the venues, sound checks greet the daylight. Ear-splitting feedback bounces straight into the bustling main drag. For a couple of quid, you can pick up a vinyl that might just be the first pressing of something about to explode, or a jacket that smells faintly of last winter's rain and someone else's Marlboros. You might even spot a band fresh from the NME classifieds, hanging about with mates, plotting world domination over cans of Tizer. All the while, the faces shift but the spirit remains an ageless, anarchic congregation for music lovers, misfits, and outsiders who felt the edge of the mainstream was just a little too smooth. The venues themselves are never truly silent. Standing proud through the 3-day weeks, the Thatcher years, the miners' strikes, and the arriving trains of hopefuls from the suburbs, each bringing their own tunes and tempos. Regeneration would one day sweep paler tiles onto old facades. Glass where there was once brick and barista pumps where sticky beer mats used to lie. Smoking bands cleared the air only to reveal new ghosts, while mobile phones transformed every gig into a sea of small, glinting rectangles. But those who walked through Camden's sticky-floored sanctuaries in the brief wild years remember not just the decibel count, but the feeling. A giddy, charged belonging where tribal lines blurred and, for a night or two, a battered pair of shoes and a shared mixtape could make you part of something bigger. These were spaces where style was currency, individuality flourished, and even the outcasts had somewhere to dance until the trains ran again. Today, the remnants are there if you know where to look. Gig poster fading in a window, a jukebox tucked tight in a corner, echoes of laughter carried on a canal breeze. If you can still taste the burnt tang of cheap lager in the air, and remember a night when the ballroom seemed like the entire noisy, brilliant world, we want to hear your story. Let us know what Camden means to you, what band you saw, what jacket you wore, what moment it all clicked down in the comments below. Who knows, your memories might be the spark for someone else's journey back through time. The night air is thick with the tang of fried onions and diesel as the number 109 trundles through the glimmering South London streets, headlights slicing the drizzle. Neon flickers against rain-streaked windows. Laughter spills from the upper deck where night shift workers and wide-eyed revelers jostle for a seat. All heading through the darkness to Brixton's heart. On board, the muffled thump of cassette headphones mixes with the distant echo of reggae from far-off clubs, a promise that, even in the small hours, the city is wide awake. In the Brixton of the late 1970s and early 1980s, the night bus home was more than a way to dodge the cost of a black cab. It was a stage for characters, the sharp-suited, broad-lapelled clubbers, their breath mingling with the cool night as they gather outside the ritzy cinema. Housewives with carrier bags looped over their wrists, picking up cheap groceries from the late-night corner shop. Students in battered trenchcoats, cradling copybooks and a Metro newspaper for the first train home. The ride itself was an event hop-on with a crumpled travel cup. The bus conductor clinking coins in a leather pouch, hollering out the next stop over the hum of the engine. Brixton, ahead on the route, felt like both a destination and a beginning. Step off at Brixton Station Road and the pavements pulse with energy. The aroma of jerk chicken drifts from a tin shack by the covered market. Smoke and spice curling above rows of fruit stalls, left shuttered papayas and yams stacked high, traded by day and haunted by foxes at night. The soundtrack here isn't the chart hits of Radio 1, but a low, persistent reggae bass, leaking from the Hanover Grand or a makeshift blues party wedged in the back room of a paint shop. Indoors, a battered turntable balances on crates, spinning cuts from Dennis Brown or Aswat, the needle skating across brittle black vinyl. Dancers young and old move in the half-light, their backs glossy with sweat, arms raised to catch the steady, shuddering heartbeat of the sub-bass. Just down Atlantic Road, dusk gives way to a subtler magic. A sooty doorway leading to an underground jazz bar, known only by rumor and the shifting glow behind its steamed-up windows. Here, musicians huddle on a postage-stamp stage, stitched with worn carpet, saxophones gleaming golden under bare bulbs. The clink of half-pint glasses, double diamond or Mackerson stout mingles with the dusty warmth of a double bass. In this space, color, creed, and accent fold away. City van drivers, art students from Camberwell, and West Indian nurses on a rare night off, all lean in, swaddled in a honey-thick fog of cigarette smoke, as the trumpet blares out, Naima, or Take 5. Crowds ebb and flow on Electric Avenue, Brixton's beating midnight artery, as the market sleeps. Youths with patched-up denim and afro combs strut between street lamps, sharing Lions-made Zoom lollies, crunchy sweet even on chilly evenings. Police panda cars prowl the side roads, but inside record shops like Red Records, owners leave the lights on, spinning new arrivals for club DJs, scavenging for the next big sound. Outside, the wind sometimes carries the aftertaste of last week's unrest, a reminder that in these years, Brixton's nights are never wholly carefree. Yet, on Friday or Saturday, it is the music and the people that matter, a patchwork of cultures finding their rhythm after dark. Above all, there's a feel on the night bus home. Boots sticky with spilled cider. Hands gripped to green leather seats as the route master pitches over speed humps. The journey is a shared exhale, heads nodding against condensation-fogged windows. The top deck is draped in the patina of the era. The faint whiff of silk-cut cigarettes, snatches of conversation about gigs, strikes, the newly opened Sainsbury's, a battered copy of The Face left on a seat, pages creased with anticipation for next Saturday's party. For so many, Brixton wasn't just a stop on the bus map, it was a cradle for dreams and rebellion, a safe haven in the ever-sprawling city. The clubs and bars after dark were more than escapes. They were vital meeting points for communities often pushed to the delay and edge of mainstream London. Here you could hear the pulse of migration, the calypso and score, alongside the jazz standards beloved by older Londoners, and see the latest threads from market stalls mingling with the easy confidence of punk. The night was a tapestry, black, white, Asian, and everyone in between, all wound into the same throb of bass, cowbell, and laughter. These night journeys changed as the decades wore on. The big steel route masters were phased out. Those battered corner shops replaced with high street mini-marts. Jazz bars vanished, snuffed out by rising rents and competing nightclubs, while beloved record shops battled the gradual drift to CD and, later, digital. In their place rose coffee chains and bars, cities glowing differently, but perhaps never owning the same layered texture. Yet memories of those nights, of oily pavements, the taste of fried fish and ginger beer, the hot press of a crowd beneath rotating disco lights linger in the bones, kept alive in the grainy flashes of old photos and the familiar opening riff of a two-tone anthem echoing through tinny speakers. Today, the night bus to Brixton still hums along its ancient route. Though the tickets are plastic, and the bus conductors long since melted into city legend, new generations pile aboard as the clock ticks towards midnight, inheritors of a city forever shifting but tethered to decades of melody, struggle, and celebration. The clubs may thrum to different beats, yet the desire to belong, to dance, to escape till dawn, these tie us to the South London night in ways that never fade. If you've caught the night bus home from Brixton, found yourself swept up in a reggae basement or jazz club, or remember the rhythms and scents of those after-hours streets, we'd love to hear your stories in the comments. What did your Brixton night sound like, and where did your journey take you next? Glass glimmers in the halogen twilight of Canary Wharf. From the pavement you can see the mirrored towers catching the last amber smears of city sunset, while just beneath their gaze a crowd of sharp silhouettes flows towards the hush and buzz of a wine bar carrying the scent of perfume, fresh print, and a distant trace of commuting rain. Docklands, once the pulsing heart of London's shipping industry, is now fragrant with aftershave and new beginnings. The mid-1980s and the yuppie phenomenon has touched down, bringing with it a new atmosphere of moneyed optimism and the twinkle of glasses raised at the close of business. Step inside a city bar, perhaps Henry J. Bean's or a reimagined Old Inn perched on a corner, and the scene is unmistakably, unashamedly 80s. Air conditioning hums and pop classics tumble from wall-mounted speakers, mingling with laughter pitched ever so slightly louder than needed. Men in crisp, double-breasted suits walk tall, their collars anchored by bright silk ties, hair pomaded into quiffs, while women parade bold, angular silhouettes, pin-sharp shoulders, high-waisted skirts, and gleaming plastic earrings. Everyone seems to carry a mobile phone as large as a brick in one hand, and a flute of champagne or a bottle of imported lager in the other. There's no limit to the confidence tonight, no sign yet of the uncertainties that will come to shape the next decade. Just a short tube ride east, the once grey financial heartland is catching up. Threadneedle Street, Broadgate, hives of daytime seriousness, are now, after 6, playgrounds for grown-up deals. Outside Old Bar 1 and Wine Rack, knots of sales execs and junior analysts spill onto the flagstones, brandishing City of London club ties or the unmistakable green and red braces of a freshly minted accountant. Overhead, neon flickers on the specials board. Chilled Chablis, French Brie, American-style nachos, prawn cocktail in a Sunday glass. The scent of expensive perfume seems carved into the very fabric of the furniture, a marker of the new affluence. Evenings have a rhythm. Work winds down, jackets are slung casually over one arm, and the wave of commuter urgency gives way to a tide of self-assurance. Pavement wine bars, a new breed from the likes of Pitcher and Piano or the first iterations of Slug and Lettuce, are bright, clean, and subtly defiant with their polished glass, pastel walls, and minimal fuss. Inside, people clink glasses heavy with Chardonnay and laughter. Deals made and lost over the hum of the Human League and sod. It's no longer the Pint and Peanuts crowd. The atmosphere is aspirational, with espresso machines hissing, and a showing of culinary bravery in the form of sun-dried tomatoes or peppered salami towers. The 80s palate is discovering Europe, and lunchtime sandwiches have finally met their match in balsamic-dressed salads. Just around the corner, the boutiques and high street chains have followed suit. Next, Principles and Austin Reed display their power dressing like battle armor, shoulder pads, monochrome tailoring, and boxy briefcases. Department stores brim with gadgets, see-through calculators, filofaxes, Casio digital watches, that promise to make your life as streamlined as your trading strategy. In Woolworths, even the pick-and mix seems to have a certain sheen, contrasting sharply with the rugged workmans now refitted as cappuccino bars or converted lunch counters. Outdoor advertising offers credit cards and cut-price flights to Marbella, hinting that, really, anything is possible on a Friday evening. There's a distinct smell to this era, too. Fresh plastic from new credit cards, dry-cleaned polyester, and on the air, the faint metallic tamps that always signals rain somewhere just beyond the glass. The city feels electrified by possibility, by permissive plastic, by the relentless nose-in-front hunger of the young urban professional, or yuppie, on the streets. The all-night taxis slow at zebra crossings, as a generation who has swapped Ford Cortinas for BMW 3 Series spills out, en route from boardroom to after-party. The hackneyed old London of puddles and pigeon droppings isn't gone. Instead, it glimmers beneath the sparkle, a reminder that all this is new, even a bit precarious. But, for now, under the sodium lights, it feels as if everyone in the city has somewhere to go, someone to toast, and something just out of reach to chase. There are, of course, grumbles from the sidelines. Some bemoan the end of the proper pub, all froth and dark wood, lamenting the rise in prices and the decline of a pint of bitter. But in the spirit of the times, those grumbles are fleeting or relegated to pages of Private Eye and The Guardian. nestled between cartoons, lampooning braces, and brick phones. For many, especially those growing up in the uncertainty of the 70s with 3-day weeks and strikes, this is a new narrative. The chance to wear ambition on your sleeve and take a photograph in front of a skyline still under construction. There's a sense of collective uplift, however temporary, that shapes the rhythm of city life. The after-work drink becomes a performance, a social currency, a way of saying you belong amid the blitz of progress. Yet, beneath the shimmer, shadows of change are already forming. By the decade's end, the boom would sour, Black Monday would rattle markets, and the loads-o'-money brashness would become fodder for comedy sketches rather than dinner party aspiration. And as the 90s gathered pace, minimalist coffee bars, open-planned care, and casual dress Fridays would begin to supplant the high-gloss 80s edge. Still, for a time, this was the pulse of the city, optimistic, daring, and, above all, convinced of its own momentum. For the communities caught up in it, the boom brought more than just drinks and designer labels. It was a statement of arrival, a way to carve out a place in a city defined by centuries of tradition. Just as mods might once have flocked to Carnaby Street, the yuppie era painted another shade onto the capital's canvas. Brighter, brasher, shot through with a hint of imported Chardonnay. After-work bars became new village greens, places for gossip, plans, new friendships, and occasionally the faint pang of longing for the wood-panelled snug or the fog of an older London. The city's nights changed. So too did people's hopes for themselves, encouraged by the prospect that anyone, rain-slicked pavements glisten beneath the restless Soho night, and neon from the Admiral Duncan's sign melts into puddles, sending flickers of pink and blue across battered brogues. It's Friday, sometime in the mid-1970s. The thick London air is charged with both anticipation and secrecy, and the soot-stained facades of Old Compton Street shelter a hidden world, half in shadow and half ablaze with cultish life. Just steps from the thundering red Routemaster buses, past shop-fronts shuttering for the night, and the lingering warmth of corner cafes. An unmarked black door between a tobacconist and a bakery stands slightly ajar. A sharp whiff of cigarette smoke escapes in tandem with a thudding bass line from a jukebox, barely audible above the city's din. Inside, the bar is heavy with the tang of gin and sawdust, and the muted swirl of conversations clings to a red velvet banquette along the wall. The patrons, here men and women alike, slip inside with cautious glances, draped in sheepskin coats and polyester shirts, collar tips sharp against their necks, each hoping that behind these doors they might be free to laugh a little bolder. The lighting is low, scattered from Art Deco sconces up high, brushing everything with a coppery, forgiving warmth. Outside, rain taps on the window pane, in time with the beat, as if urging the walls themselves to keep the secrets entrusted to them. Further along, the gallon jug, with its pale blue glass and careworn chrome, hums like a hive. The air is thick with the scent of spilled ale, sticky porters, and the musk of bodies pressed close around a Formica bar. Behind it, a barman in an open-collared shirt flicks his wrists effortlessly, handing over baby chim and halves of bitter, his hands steady against the tremor of the law. Above the bustle, someone laughs too loudly at an old carry-on joke, while a woman in tartan dress spins on the spot, silver bangles chiming. In this cramped, windowless cavern, the fear and joy coalesce, the thrill of each embrace indistinguishable from a dare. There's a lingering scent of hairspray and colantata and brute end of a week, splurges on High Street, chemists woven through it all. Later, the night lures some to the French house with its cracked white tiles and heavy, oak beams, a little edgier and more cosmopolitan, where writers scribble in the margins of newspapers, and faces, framed in smoky light, belong equally to artists, actors, and ambitious misfits. The ceilings are low. The music is softer than elsewhere, a crooning chanson, barely there beneath the rumble of overlapping voices. Here, glasses clink with a quiet camaraderie, and even in tight quarters, solace is found in the gentle press of knees beneath the table, or a knowing glance passed from one side of the bar to the other. The windows fog with breath and rain, blurring the world outside, a protection, of sorts, from the city's harsh cold. Across the street waits the black cab, its blacked-out windows promising anonymity, its interior a nest of musical mischief. The clatter of coin-threepenny bits and shillings vanishes into jukeboxes loaded with Bowie and dusty Springfield. Sequined drag queens and men in fat-lapelled dinner jackets trade stories in the hush beside the back bar, while others, watchful for the sudden knock from plainclothes officers, flirt in corners, clutching cigarette holders and pints of courage. Polaroid cameras, hardly affordable, do the rounds to capture the braver souls, their faces lit up in bursts of flash, evidence to be concealed in socks or burnt after closing time. The loose are abuzz with chatter, strangers exchanging coded compliments or swapping the odd tip about where best to buy a pair of Clark's shoes in men's sizes. Outside, the aroma of Turkish coffee drifts from nearby, and the cool, sweet London air carries the sharp bite of rain and nostalgia. Drizzle pools around the feet of night owls queuing for the night bus, their breaths swirling in the lamplight. Back inside, each pub acts as an island, part sanctuary, part stage, offering nightly respite from the grey, sometimes hostile world beyond. With police raids never far from memory, everyone moves with a private choreography. A brief nod here, a hand on shoulder there, no gesture too bold, but each loaded with meaning. If you look back through old newspapers or talk to the older regulars, you'll uncover the layers of resilience knitted into these bricks. Before decriminalization, before the headlines and the marches, life on Old Compton Street demanded a delicate balance, visibility laced with discretion, belonging wreathed in risk. For some, these after-hours gatherings offered not just romance or wild abandon, but something still rarer, the everyday comfort of being ordinary, of sharing jokes, drinks, even hangovers. Free from wary eyes, the stories exchanged over shared cigarettes or scuffed-up booths in these secretive bars often became lifelines, binding together those who'd been turned away elsewhere. It was here, in back rooms and half-cellar salons, that friendships were forged and chosen families took root, weathering the black-and-white world outside with bursts of color, rebellion, and joy. Of course, nothing stays unchanged forever. The Soho of now bears little resemblance to the smoky, half-legal labyrinth of the 70s, as the world outside gradually shifted from suspicion toward something unthinkable than acceptance, decriminalization, activism, and the slow march of reform transformed these bars from tense sanctuaries to celebrated touchstones. The doors became a little less hidden, the signage more open, the laughter less shielded. Yet, as change crept in and property prices soared, some beloved bars folded, their decades of stories folded into the fabric of the street. The pulse of Old Compton Street beat on, still diverse, still defiant, but never quite as clandestine. Beneath the glass towers and noodle bars, a trace lingers of what once was. Those fragile, courageous nights when a handful of neon-lit watering holes mapped out a brave, unlisted city. So, did you ever slip past those Art Deco doorways, or know someone who lived for those late Soho hours? Let us know your memories, stories, or favorite Old Compton haunts in the comments below. who knows what treasures we'll uncover together in London's long-hidden time capsule. Strobing colours pulse across battered wallpaper, the faint tank of sweat and dry ice clinging to the air. It's a Saturday in the early 90s, somewhere on the outskirts of London. In your palm, a flyer, psychedelic, bold, and mysterious girls, slightly at the edges. Its promise of euphoria inked in acid colours. Whispering of secret dance floors, and speakers stacked to trembling heights. Somewhere behind an innocuous warehouse door, the city thrums outside, but here, hearts beat to a different drum. The birth of the rave flyer was no accident. As the city's rhythms shifted in the late 1980s, so too did its visual language. By day, the capital's pavements buzzed with life. Mini-skirted shoppers in fluorescent windbreakers dodged Fiesta vans. Smith and our price cassettes rattling in Woolworth's carrier bags. But by night, a different network blinked alive. Rave flyers slipped deftly into jean pockets or pressed flat between the pages of smash hits, were more than mere invitations. A rectangle of lurid imagery, a cartoon alien, a melting clock, fractal patterns meant you were in the know. Venture back to one of those first whispered gatherings. There's a bitter edge to the winter wind, and long after the last milk float has clinked down the estate, you walk toward a hard-to-find postcode etched in neon ink. The flyer is your map, coded in riddles directions, promising adventure at the old gas depot or South Bank transit sheds. Everyone in the know arrives, clutching the same slip of card. This ephemera binds strangers into a fellowship of anticipation. The bouncer, more gatekeeper than security, eyes your flyer as closely as your Doc Martens before waving you in. Inside, poster-plastered walls thrum with bass. Senses are overloaded. Orange glow sticks were fog rolls between bodies. Scents of damp stone and clove linger. For the flyer's £2 entry from a pocket fat with crumpled pound notes and 50p pieces. You readmitted into a world out of step with the artistry of each flyer reflects a burgeoning DIY scene. Students with scalpel knives and access to an ancient Xerox at the Polytechnic lay out graphics in bedrooms cluttered with copy paper, glue sticks, and drenched in the fizz of Lucozade cans. Their influences are scavenged from record sleeves, Japanese arcade posters, and the acid-washed dreams flickering from late-night Channel 4, from the gentle swirl of rave smileys to garish gradients and sci-fi fonts, each piece strikes a note of rebellion, a flare against drab high streets and the gloom of a country feeling its way out from beneath the weight of recession and the closing of the mines. Sometimes, the artist is there at the party, wide-eyed at the sight of their creation crumpled beneath 1,000 stamping trainers. It all moves above and below the radar. Daylight finds these same flyers papering phone boxes, bus shelters, and the glass walls of independent record shops, places like Fat Cat or even the tape counter at Woolworth's, where clued-in staff lend a conspiratorial nod. The city's infrastructure, unsuspecting by design, becomes a canvas. You catch glimpses from the upper deck of a red route master. Waves of flyers fluttering on lampposts, splashed with UV ink and bold block-lettered promises of pure ecstasy all night. For police and politicians, who see only trouble and noise complaints, these little slips are the evidence of an anarchic underbelly. But for hundreds of thousands of young people, these scraps are the keys to belonging in an electrified London night. For some, these aren't just invitations, they are souvenirs. Drawers in childhood bedrooms collect them alongside wrinkled gig tickets and Polaroids. A tactile memory bank of the escapades and friendships forged through sweat and serotonin. Others tape the brightest examples on their walls, a badge that signals allegiance to a movement that lives outside parents' comprehension and mainstream radio. Each unique design marks the fleeting nature of the night itself. Once morning comes, the flyer's relevance evaporates, becoming just another secret memento of where you were and who you might become. Meanwhile, the flyers of late 80s and early 90s rave stand apart from the pop, concert or football match adverts of previous generations, where previous decades relied on thick card and monochrome block text. Now the paper is thin enough to fold into the lining of a bomber jacket, the ink neon enough to glow dimly under UV light. There's a whiff of rebellion and ingenuity. By sidestepping official channels and council permissions, each flyer is a gentle two-fingered salute to the old ways. Some parties move venue at the last minute, the hotlines handwritten on the back, changing at a moment's notice in response to new police crackdowns. The flyers become passports to a world moving faster than the authorities can keep up. As the sun spills into a new morning, exhaustion and elation hang together on the edge of city oblivion. Outside, tired Turkish takeaways and rain-glossed bus stops, ravers staggered home, their pockets stuffed with half-damp bits of card, while mainstream culture caught up clubs going legal. Flyers, sometimes acquiring barcodes and glossy finishes, the homegrown magic dimmed a little. What was once word of mouth and whispered anticipation became, over time, the fodder for glossy magazine listings and FM radio countdowns. The sense of mystery ebbed, replaced by a Saturday night routine and new forms of gatekeeping. But for a certain slice of a generation, the flyer was more than disposable advertising. It was art, rebellion, and memory. The design, handout, and dog-eared survival of these little masterpieces spoke of connection of lives lived at full pitch for a handful of nights each season. They were the tickets and talismans to a parallel city where rules bent, friendship blossomed, and music tied communities tighter than postcode, football club, or school uniform ever could. So, if you ever find one tucked inside an old mixtape or beneath a faded copy of NME, let the colors jolt those vanished nights to life. The flyer was never just paper, was hope, scribbled in fluorescent ink and passed from hand to hand beneath the rain-washed lights of the capital. What about you? Did you save any flyers, posters, or tickets from your own rave days or favorite London haunts? Share your relics and recollections in the comments, and let's celebrate those unsung works of art that lit up the night. Amidst the ticking hush of the city just before dawn, pale sodium lamps flicker against slick paving stones, and the last buses rattle off towards distant suburbs. It's 2 a.m. somewhere between yesterday's revelry and today's responsibilities. At a humble chip shop with its steamy windows, glowing against the darkness, laughter and the unmistakable scent of frying salt and vinegar cut through the chill, as a gaggle of friends in disco flares and leather jackets fumble for coins and order fish and chips freshly wrapped in sodden newspaper tight against the night air. Step back, not quite to the jazz age, but firmly into the heydays of late 1970s and early 80s Britain. Beneath the thump of Saturday night discos, and the hum of Vauxhall Cavaliers idling at the curb, late-night food culture is in full swing, transforming high streets up and down the country. The chip shop's neon sign buzzes under a sky marbled by drizzle, while Dancing Queen echoes faintly from an upstairs club. Out here, it's camaraderie as much as sustenance, a constellation of chattering locals, their cheeks flushed, gathering for one last bite before trudging home. There's a familiar ritual to it, spilling out into the brisk night with pockets full of loose change, embarking on a beeline for the chip shop or kebab van, guided by memory and scent rather than any signpost. At the heart of it all stands the fish and chip shop, the chippier bastion of British belonging. It's no frills, a bit steamy, stacked with wooden benches worn smooth by generations, and a faded menu board listing cod haddock and pie in mangled plastic letters. The counter lady does a brisk trade, her hands deftly folding newspaper around chunky chips glistening with oil, while battered fish crackles temptingly in the hot box. The tills take shillings and new decimal coins alike, a reminder of recent change and enduring tradition. There's a small jar of pickled eggs behind the counter, cheap curry sauce bubbling in a tin, and a choice between salt, vinegar, or if you're feeling continental, a squirt of ketchup from a battered bottle. Out on the pavement, huddled against the wind, you plunge a splintered wooden fork into your paper parcel, feeling the heat against your frozen fingers. The tang of malt vinegar pricking your senses, chips steaming in the night. A few yards along, the late-night kebab van newcomers back then, their presence marking the gradual cosmopolitan shift of British streetscapes does brisk business. There's something faintly exotic about doner meat turning on a slow spit under harsh fluorescent light. Garlic sauce in polystyrene trays, pita bread warmed just enough to soften the chill. Kebab houses sprouted on street corners, often staffed by Turkish Cypriot or Kurdish families, blending newly arrived tastes with the older rhythms of the city. Here, outside the neon and linoleum of the van, the exchange is quick and a little boisterous, carried out in a cheerful melee of clubbers, off-duty hospital porters, and night shift workers forms a temporary, lively tribe under the street lamp. Someone inevitably drops a slice of tomato and laughs, kneeling in the gutter to retrieve it. Around closing time at the club down the road, a former ballroom, reborn as a haven for northern soul or synthpop, doors swing wide, spilling out a stream of punters with crumpled fivers, cheap perfume and sweat clinging to their clothes. Some wander straight for the chip shop, others get drawn into the kebab queue. The two stops marking the final circuit before night's end. Now, the thrum of music is replaced by the background drone of traffic lights ticking, the hiss of fryer oil, and the murmur of conversations about missed buses, troubles with bosses, which tune would top the charts next week. It is an unlikely confessional, where stories are swapped and hangovers preemptively managed with a greasy mouthful. A few brave souls make last orders at an all-night bakery, scarfing down sausage rolls or custard tarts, but, for most, it's fish, chips, or a loaded kebab, eaten there and then. The hands may be cold, but the food pulses warmth right through you. These late-night rituals are tinged with a decade's wider context. The after-effects of the 3-day week, the smell of coal smoke from distant miners, strikes memories of waiting in petrol queues and the thrill of a corner shop pick and mix for tomorrow's hangover. There's a sense that cheap, hearty food is not just a treat but a sturdy comfort, a reliable endnote after nights that sometimes seem uncertain, while kebab houses and expanded chip shop menus quietly signal migration and a changing Britain. There's still a stubborn essence of the old. Queues that snake round the block, gossiping mates taking the mickey, the steady hands of chippy owners who've seen 20 years of New Year's Eves and last buses rumble past outside their glass. As the first milk floats grown into the half-light, those last handfuls of chips and streaks of sauce are devoured on benches, bus shelters, and, occasionally, sprawled across the bonnets of cars. Sometimes you'd find groups tucked against a shop front, hoods raised, marshalled by an unofficial pecking order of hard-won local knowledge. Who does the crispiest batter? Which van puts extra vinegar on? Which kebab shop lets you in for a cuppa if it's tipping down? These city centre after-hours scenes would transform empty streets into momentary festivals, rowdy, but rarely mean. With as many hugs as scuffles, chips passed round and cigarettes shared. For a time, every town felt just a little bit more like home. Gradually, though, things began to shift. Health and safety swept through, polystyrene trays edged out the old faithful newspaper, and longer licensing hours and stricter policing changed how crowds ebbed and flowed into the night. The old chip shop shuffle was edged out as all-night burger chains and supermarkets took over, with ready meals and microwave curries dimming the collective appetite for queuing under damp skies. Meanwhile, city centres grew upright, glassy, and CCTV beset pushing many of the old-school chippies and independent vans further to the margins or out for good. The kebab van's neon might still pierce the dusk in some towns, but the pace has slackened. The messy camaraderie, a little rarer. Yet for a generation now, adults with distant knees, maybe even grandchildren, a light drizzle shimmers on Charing Cross Road, glancing off neon, the city's hum swelling as you near the queue snaking round. The block, high heels clicking against rain-slicked curbstone. Heavy perfume blending with tobacco, the faintest temps of spilled gin in the night air. The illuminated sign above the doors, the Hippodrome glows, electric blue and coral pink through curling mist, promising something glitzy, slightly illicit, and out of reach for most. It's 1978, and primetime London thrums behind heavy velvet ropes, where hope and hubbub crowd the shadows, and if you're lucky, you catch the flash of paparazzi bulbs as another rumoured star sidesteps inside. Step past those fabled doors, and you're hit by a heavy swirl of heat, aftershave, and the bassy thump of a disco anthem spun on vinyl by a DJ with too much hair and too much confidence. Crimson flock wallpaper and gold-embossed pillars conjure the faded grandeur of music halls. But any hint of Edwardian restraint is swept aside by the crowd. Tonight, tables are cluttered with baby chim glasses and sticky rum sodas, as city girls in sequined halters jostle with besuited ad men, theatre types dripping with backstage sweat, and faces whose likenesses grin from the latest smash hits or radio times. The sound system vibrates through the soles of your platforms, setting off secondary rattles in glasses and chatter at every crowded banquet. For those old enough to remember, the Hippodrome wasn't just a club, it was a stage for possibility. One night, a bouncer called Ron, his brile-creamed hair immaculate and lapels almost as wide as his shoulders, shuffled a knot of excitable fans aside as a certain pop impresario, on the up and in, outrageously. High heels swanned in with two actors from a hit soap. Later, Ron would claim to have rugby tackled an inebriated TV quiz champion all the way to the cloakroom, and found a Hollywood actress fast asleep in the gents. In hushed tones, waitresses swapped tales of near misses. A guitarist's fistfight behind the bar over a Black Russian. A rogue page 3 girl lost 4 hours in the labyrinthine corridors. A midnight ban for a married footballer flouting the club's no-press policy. Out by the loose, the air always thick with expensive hair, lacquer, and nervous cigarette smoke. Even the stonist staff kept a sharp eye for trouble and gossip. On starry Friday nights, flashbulbs burst outside, but inside it wasn't all glamour. Beyond the shiny veneer, the Hippodrome was patched together by a small army of staff who gave it texture and ritual. Cloakroom girls tucked punters, jumpers, and mock croc handbags behind thick velvet drapes, scanning for traces of frayed NCP parking stubs and the occasional 10-bob tip. Behind the bar, a Liverpudlian barman polished pint glasses with a London Palladium tea towel, grumbling to the regulars about shortages, lime for the G&Ts, clean ashtrays, and change for the slot machines. On quieter weeknights, the place held a different magic. The lights dimmed to a rich purple, the scent of wax, polish, and spilled port lingering in the sticky hush, while low-voiced deals were cut between fading cinema grandees and wide-eyed hopefuls. Feet slipped surreptitiously out of new platform shoes under the table. In these heady days, a visit could mean a brush with the big names Elvis Costello propping up the bar Diana doors, posing for a tabloid snap, or the sight of a famous chat show host gamely chain-smoking by the fire exit. Local faces packed in too, mini-skirted girls on hen nights, lads from Kentish Town splashing their first paychecks from Woolies, and bands of West End shop floor managers still shimmering from late-night overtime at C&A or B. The jukebox sprayed the latest disco hits, but every now and then the place shivered as they announced a surprise performer, sometimes a true legend, sometimes a one-hit wonder already drifting towards obscurity. Nobody cared. For a few hours, everyone was bathed in the same decadent glow. Not all memories are golden. More than one regular remembers that cloying morning after fug as first light creeps through the city's smudged windows, and the cleaners sweep away last night's stardust with the empty embassy packets and pork pie wrappers. There were wind-down moments, too, when the club fell into an uneasy hush as news broke of political turmoil. The miners' strikes, or, later, the Notting Hill riots. In tough economic stretches, the Hippodrome's crowd thinned. A little less champagne, and a few more halves of mild, but somehow, the doors stayed open, holding firm whilst many high street changed, not least some of the Hippodrome. Sown neighbours folded quietly under economic pressure or blitzes of new development. The corner shops and milk floats still lingered round the backstreets in those days. But for thousands of Londoners, the Hippodrome was a steady beacon in a city rolling through change. As the 80s crept in, there were whispers about licensing, changes in ownership, and stricter rules for the famous and the infamous alike. There were new faces on the doors, stockier, more wary, ushering out the last stragglers when licensing hours called time at 11. Staff found their tips dwindling as people arrived later and left earlier, drawn away by trendier basement clubs in Soho or the rise of glitzier superclubs pulling in city workers flush with the promise of Thatcher-era bonuses. The cassettes in the DJ booth outgrew their spandex and started spinning Duran Duran and Madonna. Some old regulars missed the chaos, the unpredictable thrill of never knowing whether the next punter through the doors was a future legend or just another face on the bus. Yet there remained a romance in the Hippodrome's time-worn carpets and burnished brass, evidence of lives touched by wild nights out, off-the-cuff performances, gossip that crackled through morning tabloids, and the clandestine sense that, for a few shining hours, anyone could be someone on the city's greatest stage. To the community, both the famous and the utterly unknown, the Hippodrome meant a kind of electric democracy, a place where barriers blurred and scandal mingled with stardust. It offered story fodder for cabbies and corner shop banter, a moment to step out